Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of Family Matters. Thank you all for the amazing feedback of the last guest we had. Really appreciate it. But I'm honoured, excited. It's actually another Australian. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry to the Kiwis listening. Only kidding. But I'm really honoured to have Dr. Joanna Howe along. If you don't know the work that she's doing in the pro-life space, you need to. So Dr. Howe, Joanna, welcome along.
Thank you. Lovely to be with you.
Joanna, if you don't mind, I will do a little introduction about you. I don't know if you're anything like me. It's sometimes hard to hear because you've heard it many times and you know it already, but there'll be some in New Zealand who are not aware of you. Joanna is a mother of 5, so I can sympathise with that as a father or stepfather of 5. She is a prolific Instagrammer on social media, particularly in the area of abortion. And if you haven't had the chance to jump onto the likes of her Instagram, please do. She has a doctorate in law from Oxford University. She's a Rhodes Scholar, and now she is a professor of law at Adelaide University. So, I mean, amongst other things, Joanna, jumping right in, you're a living example that you can hold a career and a family.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's one of the biggest lies that second wave feminism told women, and we're still telling women that lie today, that you have to kill your children in order to be equal to men, and to be truly empowered as a woman, you have to have the right to kill your children. And, you know, I was at Oxford in my mid-20s, and the best seminar I attended there was not within the academic stream. It was one that was put on as an extracurricular event, and it was called Books and Babies. And I just got married and I was thinking about having a baby, but I wasn't sure how it would look being a full-time student. And they had a senior gynecologist who said to the young women in the room, have your babies. No, actually, the way it worked was the senior academic said, don't have babies till you're 35 and you've got career success and professional security. And then the gynecologist jumped in and she's like, don't listen to her. Have babies now when you're young because that's the best time to do it. And I was, at that point, at the very start of my career, but I just made a decision, actually, that I wanted a world where we empowered women to do both, and that I had to kind of live that example out. So decided that I would structure the building of my career around the building of my family. And while it has come at times it's been stressful, but it has worked out so well. And I think at my university, I've had to communicate at various times very assertively, this isn't going to work for me. I've got young kids, or we're going to have to move this meeting to a different time. And I'm hoping that by speaking up as well, it will pave the way for other women to do this. But I also hope that by modeling it on social media, people can really see the beauty of family life and the fact that deep fulfillment comes from being a mum or dad. And we shouldn't be putting that away or kicking the can down the road into the future because of our careers. It's just the wrong prioritization, and it's not what true empowerment is for women, neutering their reproductive capacity or potential because of this. Sorry, I give very long-winded answers. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. I'm a former politician. I could talk for hours and say nothing, but you're actually incredibly articulate. So thank you. And I think it's one of the reasons many people have started following your social media. I mentioned my wife, Rachel. One of the many reasons she started following you was you were celebrating not only yourself, but your children and the fact that you had a career and balancing them. And again, I just want to encourage people who are watching this Family Matters to jump onto the likes of Instagram and elsewhere and look up Dr. Joanna Howe. It's just remarkable. And I might grant it as a man, but I find it incredibly humbling, actually, when someone like yourself shares your story and that little bit of your personal life. I mean, how have you found that, if you will? You're putting yourself out there in public quite a bit now. How are you? And if I might ask, your family adjusting to that?
Yeah, and I think when I made the decision 2 years ago to do this, it was when South Australia, the state where I live, the parliament was legislating abortion up to birth. And I'd been a little bit involved in the advocacy around why that law was so barbaric. But it was watching it in the parliament and seeing this incredibly poor quality of debate that is stirring in my heart was to do more. And I had my 5th child at that point. He was 1 year old, and I was coming back off maternity leave to work. And, I felt this deep fear of, oh, there goes my career. It's absolute career suicide in Australia, as I'm sure it is in New Zealand, to speak out on abortion from a perspective that calls people's attention to the human rights of our children in utero. I was an associate professor then. I assumed I would never make it to professor because of that. And it was scary, but it was a decision that I made with my family and with the children. So the older children were very encouraging about me doing this. My husband was very supportive. We didn't know what the future was going to hold or look like. And when I started posting to Instagram and then Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, I just, I never even thought those words would come out of my mouth. But once I started doing that, I could see that people were interested in the conversation. And then at first I didn't share about my family because I think I felt very protective over them. I felt like, they're the little people that have been given to me to take care of. And my husband and I were nervous about what this looks like for them. So I've tried, I initially tried to really keep them out of it. But then as it went on, I started sharing little glimpses of family life. And the reason I did that was because I feel like the family is under attack so much in our modern culture, and particularly mothers are under attack. And I wanted to demonstrate the power of being a woman in this world who's fully living out, her femininity and her call to make a contribution in this world, but whose very first priority is as a wife and a mother at home. And, I'm now showing a few more glimpses of family life, and I'm having to trust that the children will be kept safe and that bad people won't target them. I'm trying to be careful about how I do it, but I feel like we just need a whole lot more courage actually in our world, particularly from probably some of the people that are following you and the people that follow me. Like a lot of Christians follow me, and I think a lot of Christians go to church and they're pretty quiet in their advocacy. And you don't have to be Christian to be against abortion. It really just should not be a faith-based issue, because this is just about the human rights of these children in utero. But I do think we are all called to be courageous, and I'm choosing to model that. It's not easy. I think the university is going to have that open up a separate complaints department just for the complaints that come in about me, because they are being inundated, like I've been through, I think, 5 investigations so far in just, 18 months. So it's intense and insane. But I just, in the end, decided I'm not going to hide who I am and the fullness of who I am and my family life out of fear.
Oh, look, I think it's great. I think it's a quote from Billy Graham. I always get it wrong, but it's something like the strength of one stiffens the spines of many. And for what it's worth, I found in my life and advocacy around pro-life issues, you can rally people beside you. I use a lot of military analogies. You leap out of that trench, leading the charge, thinking there's a whole lot of people behind you, and then you turn around. Where's everybody gone? It can be quite lonely, but I think if you have a conviction, for one of a better word, then you push on. So what is it
Sorry, I know you're the interviewer, but I just want to say something about that, because that was something that stirred my heart in 2021. I saw these incredibly brave politicians in the South Australian Parliament, and they were actually, it was guys, like it was Tom Cootes, it was Stephen Mulligan, it was David Spears. They were getting up there and they were speaking up for women and the rights of children in utero, and they were just getting bashed from all sides. And I did feel like, we as the pro-life movement weren't able to corral the hearts and minds of South Australians and really get our message out to really support these very brave politicians on the front line. By the time it gets to Parliament and you're debating abortion up until birth for any reason, we've lost. Like that law should never even be, that bill should never be even introduced, because abortion is so stigmatized because we know what it is. And I'm really grateful for brave politicians like you and the guys here in SA. But that was kind of why I also felt called to speak out into our culture, because unless people like me are prepared to put our lives on the line and really change hearts and minds, politicians can't do anything. Like, we often blame the politicians for being weak, but our culture needs to change so that abortion is unthinkable. And then, of course, legislatively, it will be illegal, but they both work hand in hand. And people like me and people listening, we need to do our job.
I think is a great encouragement. By the way, this is not meant to be a formal interview. It's a chat, so you just interrupt at any point. I mean, so to the most... Where's the kill switch? No, I'm kidding. What then, in your own words, what is wrong with abortion? I mean, many of us listening have a fundamental ethical, moral problem with it. But if I might, Joanna, in your own words, what is it that led you to that, but also what sort of the fundamental words that you would use to explain to people why you think this is wrong?
Well, I was pro-choice. I don't know if you know that, but when I was in my 20s, card-carrying feminist member of the Labor Party, very much pro-choice, and it was when someone challenged me on the issue of abortion. It was a guy, just a young guy, I think it was like 21, and we were traveling in a car, and we just started having this conversation that very quickly became a heated debate. But he started asking questions that I couldn't answer, because my theory now, looking back on that and thinking about people today, most people are pro-choice by default, but they haven't really thought about what abortion is. And when he said to me, how can you be for something that kills a human being? And I just said, no, it doesn't kill a human being. That's not what's going on here. It's not a human being until it's born. And he said, well, if it's not a human being, then what is it? Because its parents are human beings, and we know what something is by what its parents are, and then he said, and I was kind of like, well, it's not alive. And he said, well, the way we know something is alive is that it's growing, and a child in utero is growing, and he just asked these questions that were very infuriating to me at the time. and we got into, in the end, I think I just shut him down by doing that whole, you're a guy, you're not allowed to talk about it as it, this has never impacted you. You're never going to have children. You're never going to breastfeed for 9 months per child. You're never going to take the career hit. Like, I think I got pretty aggressive. And he planted seeds, not that I showed him, but I then went and did research in my own time, and I realized he was right. And so, for me now, the way I articulate it to people is every abortion kills a human being. And so therefore it has to be wrong, because any time in our human history when we've said one group of human beings has less worth or dignity, that's what's led to our greatest atrocities. If we think about the Holocaust, if we think of slavery, if we think of the Rwandan genocide, it's one group of human beings saying to another group of human beings, you don't get to share in human rights because of this particular characteristic. And for children in utero, it's because they're in their mother's womb. It's because they're younger at an earlier stage of development, and they're more dependent. And none of those reasons should be the marker of whether you get human rights or not. So, I feel like the best way we can do this is to present data and facts in front of people and to ask questions. So one way is to ask questions like that guy did. And by the way, I ended up marrying him.
Yeah. I didn't realize that. I was thinking, I wonder who the guy was and whether he, at one point he wanted to jump out of the car. But, oh, good Lord, that's fantastic. Yeah, married
him, and we are still arguing to this day, not about abortion, obviously. We're very much aligned, but about pretty much everything else. We have a very feisty kind of relationship. We're pretty good at making up to, though. Like the kids are used to kind of vibrant, like this dynamic in the home. Anyway, okay, so you could ask questions the way he did, the way James asked me, and planted seeds. Another way, which I think is helpful, is to also get people thinking about the brutality of abortion. So to know some of the horrific aspects of it. So a dilation and evacuation abortion is when an abortionist reaches into the mother's uterus with metal forceps and rips off a child's legs and pulls them out, and then the arms, crushes the skull. All of this when the baby is capable of feeling pain in the second trimester and beyond, and all of this without pain relief. And so it's just totally barbaric. In Australia, abortion is available up until birth and for any reason, and I'm pretty certain that's New Zealand as well, isn't it? So asking people, are you okay with being in a hospital where after 23 weeks, everything is done to save a wanted child, and yet a mother can go in for an elective abortion, and in the next room, we're intentionally killing that child and birthing them stillborn, when in a late-term abortion, all we'd have to do is induce that child alive and place them for adoption, because they have to come out anyway. And that was something I didn't even realize till I started going a bit further on. There's no reason for a late-term abortion. If a mother is struggling with her mental health, which is the main reason for abortion, induce the child alive after 23 weeks and intact. Mm-hmm. Don't kill them first in utero and deliver them dead. Like, that's just barbaric. And
it's one of the great lies which is perpetrated, and you'll know it with your own work and research. The doctors and specialists will say there is never a medical need to abort a baby. It's just matters, but very hard. I don't know how you found very hard at times to have those conversations, because the the language of the world, if you will, it blocks it. There's just, and this is not an excuse not to do anything, but there's just so many euphemisms and so forth now. Slogans, that's the word I was grasping for. So many slogans.
And I think that's why the work of bringing the data out is really helpful. So when South Australia was debating abortion up to birth, the Attorney General was asked, 35-week-old woman, a mother with a 35-week-old baby in utero, baby's perfectly healthy, mother has a crippling mental health reason, could that child be killed? The Attorney General, Vicky Chapman, stands up and says, no, of course not under my laws. And yet I've been able to expose that in the first 6 months of her laws, 8 gestationally viable, perfectly healthy babies with physically healthy mums, those babies were killed in utero through late-term abortion. And so I'm running a Justice for the 8 campaign. If we look back at the over 10 years worth of data from Victoria, where this disgusting law started in 2008, we can see that nearly 1 in 2 babies are killed late term and they're perfectly healthy. No medical reason to kill them. You could just induce them alive and then give mental health support to the mum and care to the baby. So the only way to combat, the lies is through the data, I think. And like you said, getting past the slogans, being really explicit. So something, I know I babble on, but
no, it's good. This has been it's a heavy subject, but it's refreshing. Please, you have the floor.
Something I've been thinking about is the whole pro-abortion movement has been based on this slogan of my body, my choice. And a lot of people have debunked it, including me online, saying, well, it's clearly not your body because there's a second person's body at stake here. But I've also been thinking about really the slogan of the pro-abortion movement should be my baby, my choice. Like it's like the baby is property. And, this idea that the baby has no rights because they're mine. Like my phone has no rights because it's just a phone. It's my property. In the old days, we thought our wives were property, our slaves were property. It's now my baby, my choice. My baby is my property. I can do whatever I want with it. And the logical conclusion of that is where Peter Singer, this so-called ethicist from Princeton, ends up, which is you can kill a baby up until 1 year old because they don't have aspirations and they're your baby. It's your choice, and he also says that about disabled babies right past 1 year old, they're disabled. It's your baby, your choice. That would be a more appropriate slogan. And like you said, we have to really expose, these meaningless slogans, reproductive freedom, reproductive rights. No, what you're really selling is killing a unique, individual, unrepeatable human being.
Yeah, well, I remember reading Peter Singer years ago with one of my degrees in ethics, and I was horrified then, and I'm still horrified now with what he suggested. The other irony, and please, apologies if this comes across as a political point, but I've often been struck with some of my friends who are particularly against capitalism and against property rights. Everything should just be held in common. They talk a lot about privilege, but then when you get on to abortion, a little bit of what you've just touched on is, well, hold on, you seem to be saying that you own this child. It's a piece of property which you can use and dispose of. I say, well, hold on, these don't get reconciled. It's usually at that point I get told, Joanna, that I'm a man and I should bugger off.
But I think it's great that you're planting those seeds because you just never know where it goes. And I think men absolutely have a voice in this space. And I would encourage male listeners to not feel like they have to not speak about it because this has been touted as a woman's issue. But you're completely right. This is authentically a progressive position to care about the human rights of children in utero. And the left, unfortunately, has just been, they've completely lost their way. But I believe that within the next 30 years, we will see this issue completely turn around. I know that's big.
Oh, no, I'm with you. I'm a great believer that in truth and very hopeful. And actually, you just got to keep trying and pushing. And I've been struck over. So New Zealand passed a terrible abortion law in 2020. It was done almost under cover of COVID. We were about to go into lockdown as the government then rammed it through. We had the strange irony, Joanna, of it's in black and white. You're a professor, a doctor of laws. The law is black and white that you can have an abortion up to birth, but the government putting it through and a complicit media argued that wasn't the case. I've never had such an extraordinary situation of what was deliberate blindness, but I've certainly found when you talk with people on the street and you begin to elaborate what's actually in the law, that they're mostly horrified. And one of them is around being born alive, because I think many people then I will stop talking and throw it back to you. But many people would say, look, until the baby's born, it's not really human, as you say. And yet in New Zealand, as in Australia, we have instances, documented evidences, where a botched abortion or whatever has led to a baby being born alive and then is allowed to die. So it's been born. It's strictly infanticide. I mean, I know this is one of the things that, if I followed your social media correctly, you get quite fired up about.
This is horrific. So I think most people have no idea that this is a byproduct of abortion up to birth and on demand. What that's effectively doing is killing healthy babies who would survive outside the womb. I just wanted to bring up your point on the complicit media, because it's like they have this playbook, because that's exactly what has happened in Australia in every state and territory, because our laws aren't passed federally, they're passed in each state and territory on abortion, exactly the same playbook. So they've marketed this as it being about decriminalisation, when in reality, no woman had ever been, taken to jail and marched off because of getting an abortion in anyone's recent memory. And yet they were jumping up and down about this being about decriminalisation. And the minute people like me said, no, this is about abortion up to birth and on demand, we were told we were misinformation. And the newspapers and online media were completely complicit in that. And so it's just disgusting. But that's where, I'm now on social media. I'm reaching 5 million people, or I have in the last 18 months, regularly reaching about 30,000 a day. This is really powerful stuff to be able to get this message out, and in particular on the born alive issue. So this is just, I don't even know how to talk about it, but basically, I guess if you've got abortion up to birth, and one of the methods is to induce labour, so to give MS two-step, the pills that are meant to kill the baby and then deliver a dead baby, except sometimes the child is not delivered dead. So in the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital a couple of years ago in Queensland, little baby Xantha, her parents went in to kill her at 19 weeks because of Down syndrome. She's born alive, and they just put her on a metal kidney dish in an empty hospital room, and she lays there for 7 minutes. Parents not informed, no care given, no comfort care given. The Queensland abortion guidelines at the time said, do not give life-sustaining treatment. Do not, and then there's nothing in the guidelines about palliative care for that child. So in 19 weeks, Xantha wasn't going to survive, but she absolutely deserved to be treated like a human being, to be wrapped in a blanket, to be held. She's gone from the place where she's safest in her mother's womb to this cold, scary world on this cold kidney dish, like no one to pick her up and even give her a hug. I just cannot believe how barbaric and disgusting that is. In Victoria, one baby every 10 days is born alive after an abortion and left to die without a legal right to care. In WA, the WA coroner had a legal duty to look into the deaths of 28 newborns born alive after an abortion and who were left to die. It was her job to do an investigation into these deaths because they were newborns, and that was the duty of the coroner. She swept it under the rug. I've written to the Chief Justice twice, and she's now just confirmed that because WA introduced abortion up to birth last year, and they got rid of the coronial investigation, which tells you something that, they want to bury this anyway. She said, oh, well, now I'm not going to look back at my backlog of cases, even though at the time she had a legal duty to do so. But is the media holding her to account? It's honestly something that I just can't even fathom, that we live in this country, and you live in a country where there is so much injustice for these really vulnerable children. And I actually, I think it calls for activism. I think it calls for outrage. It does not call for people to be passive and to just sign a petition. Like, signing a petition is good. It's like the bare minimum of what we need to be doing here, because we're literally living in a country where children are born alive and can be left to die, and no questions are asked and no care is given. Not only are we killing them right up until birth, sorry, I'm just going to keep going. Not only are we killing them right up until birth for any reason, we're now letting them be born alive and they don't have a right to care. If that's the case now in 2024, where will we be in 2044? Like, we will be saying that newborn children up until a certain age, or if they're disabled, it'll be Peter Singer's world, won't it?
Well, it will. It will. When we've had it's in euthanasia space now, but we've had puff piece articles here in New Zealand recently of parents wanting to kill their highly disabled children, and it's Some people, when I talk to them about it, go, "Oh, you're just an idiot, Simon," which they might be right, but actually, it's just I'm a philosopher. That's my background academically, and it's the logical conclusion. It goes right back to what you said at the start. It's treating an entity, another person, as an other, and that's been the start of some terrible things. And it's for me, there was at least 2 points that you're bringing up. The first is just the absolute horror of what is happening, and it undermines the core argument: before birth, nothing; after birth, human. And you're okay, well, now they're born, but you're still happy to kill them. The second is that legal side, says me to you, but where the law just sits quietly, or those representing it decide to do nothing. And you go, well, that just makes a mockery of the entire legal system. And I'm sad to say in New Zealand, Joanna, I, amongst other things, actually tried to put an amendment through about being born alive, voted overwhelmingly down. And I to this day still can't conceptualize, because again, the whole challenge was, if your argument is they're not human till birth, then how on earth can you accept ending their lives post-birth? Madness. Want to jump quickly?
Sorry. It's just that in South Australia, we were able to get that born alive protection. So I know that it's possible. I think in Queensland, I'm currently working with some guys up there, and the Katter Party has introduced a born alive protection bill. And I've just learned in the last 24 hours, the inquiry was set for June 10, and Labor, led by Aaron Harper, who runs that committee, they've pushed the can down the road, mysteriously got TBC now on the website. They don't even want an inquiry into this born alive issue, because they don't want to even have to vote on that bill, because, already I've been shaming them online. Like, one of the Labor guys at an initial hearing, he said, well, how do you even know they're a person? And so I went on social media and I just said, what? This is disgusting. He's asking, is a newborn baby a person? So we were obviously doing this with children in utero right up until birth. But now this guy is literally asking, is a child who's born alive in Queensland a person? How have we come to this? And, because I've been exposing them and shaming them, I just don't think they even want an oral hearing. So that's why, the website's been mysteriously changed. But I think we just have to keep doing this. Like, the work you're doing, I'm doing, people listening and doing, we just cannot give up, because their only play is to shut us down. The minute we start talking, we win.
Oh, and this is why I think these modern platforms, so again, what you're doing on social media, podcasts like this, online radio, makes a difference. Joanna, I'm conscious of your time, but there was one last question I wanted to raise you. It is, you're dealing with politicians. You posted about a month ago, you went to its premiere. I've got to look at my notes because I'm not as au fait with Australian politics as I should be, not at the state level, but you attended the office of the premier, so it's like the Prime Minister, Stephen Miles, in Queensland, and you went into his office to hand over some flyers. And I encourage anyone to look at it, because Joanna's incredibly calm. But basically, the political staff there basically put the police on you. Could you just talk us through that extraordinary situation?
I was not expecting that. That had not occurred to me in my wildest imagination, that they could send the police after me. So what happened was, Stephen Miles, when he was the health minister, had said to the Queensland Parliament, if we introduce my bill of abortion up to birth, late-term abortions will not increase. It's in black and white in the Hansard. And so, as any good researcher, I've looked at the data from Queensland Health, and I can see in 2018, when he made that claim, there was 152 babies killed via a late-term abortion. Fast forward to the most recent year, we have data for 2021, and there was 304 babies killed by late-term abortion. Now, I'm really bad at maths, but even I can tell that's not just an increase, that's a doubling. And, I believe that we, the people, need to hold our elected representatives to account. So I produced a flyer about how Stephen Miles lied and late-term abortions in Queensland have doubled under his law. And I went to his parliamentary office to give a flyer. I didn't think he would necessarily be in. He's the premier, he's got a big job. But I wanted to give the flyer, book an appointment, and have the opportunity to speak to him. And I wasn't expecting the best reception, because, I'm calling the staffer's boss out on something he's done. But the woman at the desk, she would not have a conversation. She would not look at the flyer. She called the police. They sent 2 police cars with sirens on for little me. Like, I wasn't aggressive. You can see from the Instagram video, I was filming it all, and it's the pinned video on my account. And it just blew my mind. And it also blew my mind that the mainstream media wasn't even interested in covering that story. You know, if I'd been a climate change activist and that had happened, and I'd gone to some mining executive and they'd called the police and they just wouldn't want to have a conversation, then absolutely, like that would be probably a front page story. But the media is so complicit in this, which is why that kind of footage actually was pretty important, because it did go viral. Ended up having a great conversation with the guys that the police sent. So they, by the time they sent the two police cars with sirens on, I'd left her office because I only stayed there for about 6 minutes. So the fact that she called the police in that time was insane. And you know, what a waste of resources. There's a youth crime epidemic in Queensland. And yet I was letterboxing a street away and the police must have seen me go down there. And so they came and we filmed the interaction with them. I ended up telling them about abortion up to birth and giving them the flyers. And, you know, it was a good opportunity actually to change their hearts and minds on abortion.
I just found it extraordinary. Again, Rachel had pointed out, I follow you as well online, but Rachel's much more, she's much better. But I was blown away. I said, being a former MP, I mean, for 12 years, I've had all and every sort of person come into my office. And for what it's worth, Joanna, never once have I actually turned people away, even some who are getting towards a level of violence, talk and listen, and never called the police. So I just found it extraordinary. But I just wonder if it's a reflection of the falsities which are required to protect the lies around abortion. It's those euphemisms, the slogans, the refusing to discuss, and now, if you will, using the power of the state to try and push you. I just found it extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
Total abuse of power and a waste of taxpayer resources. And I think it really exposes them, doesn't it?
It does. And so, again, suppose this is a good way to begin winding up, because what you're continuing to do, and again, thank you for even making the time to come and chat to little old me here in New Zealand, it's just continuing to expose, to use the fora that we have to get the voice out there. So I just wonder if there's any last encouragement you might have to our viewers and listeners before we wrap up.
Just to believe in your capacity to make change and to keep talking and keep persisting. I think that what could happen if none of us spoke up is we live in this dystopian world, you know, where children have no rights and no rights across the spectrum, not just the right to live, but the right to be safe once they're alive. You know, like pedophiles are now being called minor attracted people, you know, persons. It's just sort of mind blowing to me as a mum of 5 that that's how we could refer to a pedophile. I just think that the family and our children are under so much attack, and it's our job to speak up for them. They don't have a voice other than us. So I really encourage people. I know you can feel really beaten down by the culture and the world, but I feel tremendously hopeful. So maybe the finishing point to make is this. You know, after Roe v. Wade was overturned and the issue of abortion went back to the states, what we can see is there are now many American states that have banned abortion from the moment of conception or straight after heartbeat. There are others that have banned it after the first trimester, and the sky's not falling in, you know. And they said it would. They said pro-life lives, they don't care if women die. No, the only thing that's happening is more babies are being saved and they're not dying because of abortion. What we're doing is we're supporting women then in pregnancy, and we're putting more resources into that in those states. And so, you know, I think in our lifetime we will see this turn around because we're exposing the lies, and we've now got lived case studies in many American states that are living out this pro-life future. And so, you know, America's often 30 years ahead of the rest of us on this sort of thing. And I think that's going to be the case for this issue. We will see that as the culture shifts and as we realise that this is a better way, it's going to make a big difference in places like New Zealand, Australia and Canada.
Joanna, you're amazing. Your passion and fire, and also your wonderful articulation of this is just so deeply, deeply appreciated. So can I encourage all our viewers and listeners, again, check out her social media, not only for your own edification, but I think we can all learn from what Joanna's doing. And to everyone, thanks for joining us on Family Matters.